The Alpha slept on my shoulder. Then called me, my Omega. Part 1. The first time the most dangerous Alpha in America fell asleep on my shoulder, I thought the entire room had forgotten how to breathe. My name was Noah Carter, 24 years old, 5'8" on a good day, and invisible by profession. At the Royal Meridian Hotel in downtown Chicago, invisibility was not a weakness. It was survival. I wore a black vest, polished shoes, white gloves, and a neutral smile that said I had no opinions, no secrets, and no scent worth noticing. That last part was a lie. Beneath the thin patch hidden under my left sleeve, I was an Omega, and in a hotel where senators, billionaires, and men with private elevators held midnight meetings behind soundproof doors, being an Omega meant becoming a target for attention I could not afford. So I kept my head down, refilled crystal water glasses, carried silver trays, and pretended the world above the 72nd floor belonged to people who would never remember my name. That night, rain painted the windows in long silver lines. The private lounge was cold enough to make my fingers stiff inside my gloves, and the city below looked like a circuit board glowing under black glass. It was 2:17 in the morning when the elevator opened without a sound. Every conversation died before the doors were fully apart. I did not look up at first. I only felt the change in the room, the way expensive perfume, cigar smoke, and alpha confidence all seemed to retreat at once. Then I caught his scent, dark cedar, winter air, and something metallic like a storm rolling over steel bridges. Killian Graves had arrived. Even I knew that name. The Sleepless King. The head of the Graves Syndicate. The Alpha whose signature could move money, close streets, end careers, and make powerful men lower their eyes without being asked. He was taller than I expected, wrapped in a black overcoat damp from the rain, his dark hair pushed back, his face calm in a way that felt more frightening than anger. Not cruel in that moment. Not loud. Just absolute. His security team spread behind him, silent as shadows, but Killian did not glance at them. He crossed the lounge as if the room had been built only to give him a path. I stepped aside, lowering my gaze, praying my scent blocker would hold. He should have passed me. Men like Killian Graves always passed people like me. Instead, his steps slowed. Stopped. The air around me tightened. I stared at the silver tray in my hands, watching one drop of condensation slide down a glass. Then the most ruthless Alpha in the city sat beside me on the narrow velvet bench, close enough that the sleeve of his coat brushed my arm. My heart slammed so hard I almost dropped everything. No one moved. No one asked why. Killian turned his head slightly, and for one impossible second, his gray eyes rested on my face as if he had been searching for me across the whole dark city. Then his expression changed. The hard line of his mouth eased. His shoulders lowered by half an inch. Before I could breathe, before I could apologize, before I could run, Killian Graves leaned toward me, rested his head on my shoulder, and fell asleep. For several seconds, I did not understand what had happened. My body knew before my mind did. The weight on my shoulder was warm, real, and impossible. Killian Graves was not pretending. His breathing had slowed into a deep, even rhythm, the kind of sleep people fall into only when they feel completely safe. But there was nothing safe about that room. Every man in the private lounge looked as if the floor had opened beneath him. One server stood frozen beside the bar with a bottle of sparkling water in her hand. A senator near the window turned pale behind his whiskey glass. Killian's security team reacted last, not because they were slow, but because none of them could believe what they were seeing. Their boss, the man people whispered about as if he were more weather system than human being, had chosen the shoulder of a hotel employee as his pillow. I stared straight ahead, terrified to move. My tray rested on my knees, the glasses trembling softly against the polished silver. I wanted to say something professional, something normal, but there was no sentence in the employee handbook for this. "Excuse me, sir, your Alpha Mafia employer appears to be asleep on my uniform." A tall beta in a charcoal suit stepped forward first. He had a clean-cut face, sharp eyes, and the controlled panic of someone whose entire career had just become a disaster. Later, I would learn his name was Everett Hale, Killian's chief of security, but in that moment he was only the man reaching toward my arm. Not roughly. Not cruelly. Just with the careful intention of removing me from a problem no one knew how to name. His gloved fingers came within 2 inches of my sleeve. Killian did not open his eyes. He did not lift his head. But his hand moved from his lap to the table with a quiet finality that made the room go colder. His voice came low, rough with sleep, and perfectly clear. "Do not touch my Omega." The words fell into the lounge like a glass shattering in a church. My lungs stopped working. My Omega. Not the Omega. Not that employee. My Omega. I had never met him before tonight. I had never spoken to him, never served him coffee, never crossed his path in the marble lobby or the private elevators. I was nobody to him. I was Noah Carter from a 2-room apartment on the west side, with overdue bills folded in a cereal box and an emergency scent blocker taped under my sleeve because I could not afford the good kind. Yet Killian Graves had claimed me in front of a room full of powerful witnesses while still half asleep on my shoulder. Everett withdrew his hand at once. The other guards exchanged looks, and for the first time, I noticed fear beneath their discipline. Not fear of me. Fear of what Killian might become if someone interrupted the only peaceful sleep any of them had ever seen. A small woman in a navy suit stepped out from behind the security line, her tablet clutched against her chest. She looked less like a bodyguard and more like a doctor who had forgotten how to hide her shock. She whispered to Everett, "He has been asleep for 3 minutes." 3 minutes. The words made no sense until Everett whispered back, "He has not done that in 11 years. I heard him. I knew I was not supposed to, but the room had become so silent that even secrets had nowhere to hide. 11 years without sleep. I looked. Down at Killian, at the faint shadow beneath his eyes, at the tension still trapped in his jaw even while his breathing stayed calm against my shoulder. For the first time, he did not look like a king. He looked exhausted. My fear shifted, not gone, but changed by a strange and unwanted ache in my chest. Then his fingers curled lightly around the edge of my sleeve, not holding me prisoner, only anchoring himself there, as if some part of him was afraid I would disappear. The doctor woman raised her tablet, watching the seconds climb. 4 minutes. 5. 6. At 6 minutes and 42 seconds, Killian's eyes opened. Gray, clear, and terrifyingly awake. He did not move away. He only looked at me from inches away and asked in a voice quiet enough for only me to hear, "Why do I know your scent?" The question should have sounded impossible, but the way Killian Graves asked it made the room feel as if the impossible had already been decided and everyone else simply needed to catch up. I could still feel the imprint of his head on my shoulder, a warmth that did not belong there, a weight my body remembered even after he finally sat upright. I swallowed hard and forced myself to meet his eyes for half a second before looking away, because looking directly at him felt like standing too close to the edge of a skyscraper roof. "I do not know," I said, and my voice came out thinner than I wanted. "I have never met you before." Killian studied me as if my answer was a locked door and he was deciding whether to open it gently or remove the wall around it. Across the lounge, Everett Hale gave a small signal, and the room began to empty with unnatural speed. Senators remembered urgent calls. Businessmen abandoned untouched drinks. Hotel managers appeared from nowhere, whispering apologies no one was listening to. Within 1 minute, the private lounge that had been crowded with power became a glass box suspended above Chicago, holding only me, Killian, his security team, and the woman with the tablet. She stepped closer with careful confidence. "Mr. Graves, your pulse has stabilized," she said. "Your cortisol readings dropped by 40% during the sleep period." Killian did not look at her. He kept watching me. "Say the number, Dr. Monroe." The woman hesitated, then answered, 6 minutes and 42 seconds. Everett exhaled like the number had struck him in the chest. I tried to shift away, but Killian noticed the movement instantly. He did not grab me. He did not block me. He only said, "Stay." One word, low and quiet, and somehow more effective than a locked door. Dr. Monroe turned the tablet slightly, not enough for me to read, but enough for the blue medical graphs to glow against her face. "Mr. Carter," she said, and my stomach dropped because I had not told anyone in that room my last name. "You are not in trouble. We only need to understand what happened." The scent blocker under my sleeve suddenly felt hot against my skin. "How do you know my name?" Everett answered this time, professional and calm. "You work in a private security environment. Staff files are verified." That was a reasonable answer, but nothing about the night felt reasonable anymore. Killian leaned back, the hard edges of his expression returning, though there was a faint crease between his brows now, something almost human. "For 11 years, he said, "I have not slept without medication strong enough to make standing difficult afterward. Natural sleep does not come. Not in cars. Not in safe houses. Not in my own bed." His voice was even, but the silence behind it was enormous. Dr. Monroe continued carefully, as if stepping across ice. "We have tried clinical scent therapy, controlled sound environments, neurological treatment, trauma specialists from Boston, Seattle, and New York. Nothing has produced more than a few seconds of partial rest." Then she looked at me with a kind of astonishment that made me want to disappear. "Until tonight." I wanted to laugh because the alternative was panic. "I am a room service attendant," I said. "I bring coffee to people who do not say thank you. I am not some kind of treatment." Killian glanced at my hidden wrist. "Then why are you wearing a blocker strong enough to hide from alphas twice your size?" The question landed too close to the truth. My fingers curled into my palm. "Because being noticed has never helped me." For the first time, something in his face changed. Not softness exactly, but recognition. Outside the windows, lightning flickered behind the skyline, turning his reflection into a pale ghost beside mine. Dr. Monroe lowered her voice. "Mr. Graves, if his scent created a neurological response this strong, others may notice it too." Everett looked toward the elevator. "They already noticed the room reaction. We need to move." I stepped back then, fear sharpening through me. "No. I have a shift. I have rent. I have a life." Killian rose to his feet, tall enough to make the city behind him look small, but his voice stayed quiet. "Noah Carter, by morning, everyone who feared me will want to know why I fell asleep on your shoulder. And if they cannot reach me, they will come looking for you." I should have listened to him, but fear has a way of making ordinary life look safer than it really is. I told Killian Graves no. I said it once in the private lounge with my hand still shaking around the silver tray, then again near the staff elevator while Everett Hale spoke quietly into his earpiece, and a third time when Dr. Monroe asked if I had anyone I could stay with that night. The answer was also no, but I did not give it to her. People like me survived by keeping our empty spaces private. I had no family in Chicago, no roommate, no alpha, no emergency contact who would come if the world finally tilted too far. I had a 2-room apartment, a broken window latch, and enough cash tips in a coffee can to pay part of my electric bill. That was not much of a life, but it was mine, and I was not ready to hand it over to a man who could silence a room by breathing. Killian did not argue. That unsettled me more than if he had. He only stood under the cold lobby lights, rainwater drying on the shoulders of his black coat, and watched me sign out from my shift as if every second I spent pretending to be normal proved something sad about me. When I stepped toward the employee exit, he spoke behind me. "Noah." I stopped, even though I hated myself for it. His voice lowered. "Keep the blocker on. Do not take the train. Do not open your door unless you are certain who is on the other side." I forced myself to look back. Why would anyone care about me? His gray eyes moved to my left wrist, where the patch hid under my cuff. Because I did. The words followed me into the rain. Chicago at 4:06 in the morning was all wet pavement, taxi lights, and steam rising from manhole covers. I took a rideshare I could barely afford, sat in the back seat with my arms folded tight, and told myself the driver glancing at me in the mirror was nothing. The black sedan 2 cars behind us was nothing. The text from an unknown number that arrived halfway home was nothing, until I opened it. It was a picture of me inside the Royal Meridian Lounge, sitting perfectly still with Killian asleep on my shoulder. Beneath it were 6 words. What makes you so special, Omega? My mouth went dry. I looked out the rear window, but headlights blurred through the rain, all of them anonymous, all of them possible. When I reached my building, I paid too quickly and ran up 3 flights of stairs because the elevator smelled like old smoke and panic. My apartment door was closed. The little blue thread I tied around the handle every morning was still there, but it hung half an inch lower than it should have. Someone had opened the door and tried to put my life back exactly the way they found it. Inside, nothing was broken. That was worse. My books were lined up too neatly. My cereal box sat on the wrong shelf. The coffee can was untouched, but every scent blocker I owned was gone. Even the cheap emergency patches from my bathroom cabinet had vanished. On my pillow lay a white hotel napkin from the Royal Meridian, folded once, with a message written in black ink. Sleep well, Noah Carter. We will be close enough to know if he dreams of you again. My phone rang before I could scream. I knew the number would be unknown. I answered anyway, because some part of me already knew who had found me first. Killian's voice came through calm, cold, and awake. Open your door, Noah. I am outside.